Greetings and salutations. This is Abdelhadi with the Bitter Truth, where we may not have all the answers, but we're going to ask an awful lot of questions. You can also become a bitter pill on patreon.com/the Bitter Truth. And if you are into Stitcher or iTunes or Spotify or Podcast Addict or YouTube or anything like that, we are pretty much everywhere that you can listen to a show. And working on putting out some more content. The short blasts are coming out on Thursdays. And then regular shows on Monday. And today I'm going to be doing something by myself a little bit, kind of tying Michael Jackson and the Trump investigation into one big convoluted ball. But we're going to give it a go. Some stuff I've been thinking of. We got some great guests coming up in the next handful of weeks here. So I'm excited about that. But let's go ahead and jump into it. I'm getting over being sick, if you can't tell. And so, if my usual ire and energy seem low, it's because I'm on cold medication. So there's that. But I was, there's a couple weeks back, there was a big deal about that Michael Jackson documentary on HBO, and everyone was like freaking out. And I don't know if I can listen to Michael Jackson's music anymore. This thing is so horrible. And my first response was, well, if you separate the art and the asshole, you can't go wrong. Because honestly, if we were to measure what we like by who we like, then we'll never go to the movies. We'll never, listen to music. We'll never go to another show, never see a band. You won't buy art or go to a museum. And, does that excuse what he did? I personally think was guilty. You don't pay $14 million off to hush a kid up unless you're guilty, in my opinion. And then plus the circumstantial evidence of him just being weird and, digging on Sharon Boys' beds and that kind of thing just led me to believe that he was guilty of what they said he did. And so, having not seen the documentary, a friend of mine sent me this little clip. It wasn't little, it was about an hour. Oprah, who I really can't stand, but my friend recommended that I have an open mind and watch it despite her presence. And she did a good job. She interviewed two of the witnesses, I guess, that were in the documentary, two of the victims, rather, that were in the documentary. And if there's one point in all of this, it's basically how you cannot have it both ways, right? So for instance, these two guys that seemed credible, they seemed like they're telling the truth, and they had a lot of detail that was kind of like, wow, I guess you had to be there to know that. That was just, kind of sad to watch, and, how these guys are trying to get through with their lives, and I think both of them are married now, and they got kids and stuff, and so that's what kind of made them come out. But they did testify in favor of Michael Jackson in that last trial that he was involved in. And they lied. They admitted on this thing that they lied. And so this is the funny thing. So they admitted that they lied under oath, which is perjury. So if you can prove that, they might get in trouble. But the other part of it is that the Michael Jackson family, first thing that came out was, well, you're going to believe a bunch of admitted liars. Okay, but didn't these guys lie in your favor? So you can't have it both ways. They lied for you in that trial. They lied against the victims in that trial. So maybe they are admitted liars, but they lied for you. So now your big defense is, well, you can't believe people that are, admitted liars. They admitted to lying. Beg your pardon. So that is part and parcel why I think it's, just the height of hypocrisy for that argument to be used. I mean, same thing happened with the Mueller investigation just yesterday. He's wrapped it up and he turned it into the Attorney General. And the only thing that's come out so far is he's not recommending any indictments of anybody in relation to the election. Okay, let's clear that up, because you're going to hear a lot of goalpost moving over the next couple of weeks. And I'm seeing it now. Well, just because it wasn't about the election doesn't mean he didn't commit felonies. Absolutely, 100%. But that wasn't your point. And that wasn't what was concocted by Robbie Mook and John Podesta and Hillary Clinton. What was concocted by them was that the Russians and Bernie were responsible for Hillary losing. Not that she ran a shitty campaign. She was the only presidential campaign in, I think, ever, who figured that you don't have to actually campaign to run for office. And she refused to visit states that Barack Obama had won, which were now decimated between Bush and Obama. And she refused to visit those states because what was she going to say? The status quo was fine. Status quo was not fine in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Those states were not fine. So the status quo was not fine. People that were suffering under the weight of the healthcare plans that we have in this country, in our system, for her to crow at the top of her lungs, Medicare for all will never come to pass. Well, that's how you get 100 million voters to get up off their ass and vote for you, you stupid jackass. So, but what happened? She lost. And so rather than take responsibility and do a post-mortem and say, well, we should have done that, we should have done this. Maybe we should have cheated Bernie, which they did. I got a whole other hour on Bernie and what I think. But as far as that primary goes, when you have superdelegates that flip 4 states in favor of Hillary Clinton, making it 27 to 23, well, take those states back because the people did not vote for her. The superdelegates did. Big difference. And put those states back in the Bernie column. Now he wins. Not to mention the 14 states that were under investigation. Let's be conservative and say that 7, like New York, had some actual fraud going on. Well, now that pops the calendar up to 34 to 14, or 34 to 16, which would have kicked her ass in the primaries. But they couldn't have that. And she had so much power and she had so much on people that they just went ahead and voted for her in the superdelegate column anyway, which they were committed to her in 2015 before anybody even announced. But why do I say all that? Why do I bring all that up? Because the thing keeps going back to Trump being a Putin puppet. Trump is a Putin puppet. Well, here's the thing. If Trump's a Putin puppet, then he's a really shitty puppet, and Putin's a really shitty puppeteer. Because he's not really done much to warrant the accusation that he's a puppet of the Kremlin. Pardon me. For instance, continuing on with the Obama policy of overthrowing a democratically elected president in the Ukraine and putting in a Nazi puppet like we did, Trump has not only maintained that guy's support, but is shoveling weapons into the Ukraine. Further expanding NATO, a promise we broke to the Russians in the 80s. We said we would never go east of Germany. We have. We're up their ass now. We've imposed more sanctions on them in the last 2 years. That started with Obama, 2014. This is part and parcel why they traded in 84% of U.S. debt in the form of bonds and cashed them in, and they are off the dollar. They are using petro yuan, and they're using other currencies now, and they're using EU currency to buy and sell in that market. They're not using the dollar. And what are you going to do? Invade Russia like we did with Libya and Iraq? Can't do that. China's doing the same thing. But I say all that to say this. In addition to the Ukraine, we're still fucking about in Syria, even though ISIS is technically defeated. We're supposed to be out of there. Not getting out of there. We still have, I think, 14,000 troops there, or 7,000 troops there. By the way, when Obama left office, one of the half-decent things he did was he left us only 300,000 or 300 troops in Syria. And the 14,000 that we have in Syria now was Trump escalations. So when he was going to back, or 7,000 rather, I beg your pardon. So when he was going to back it off to 3,000, or back 3,000 out, and then he backed off of that, well, what ended up happening was we didn't do anything different in Syria than we've been doing for the last 6, 7 years, 8 years. So Trump basically lied, but he's still in, so he's in Syria. Russia doesn't like that. We're about to invade Venezuela. Russia doesn't like that. We're fucking about with Venezuela. Russia doesn't like that. Neither does China, by the way. And these guys are not our enemies, technically. For those of you that labor under the new Cold War delusional crap that's been spun for the last couple of years, here's a little history lesson. Communism died about 30 years ago. There's a McDonald's in Moscow now and everything. We don't have a war with Russia. We're not at war with Russia. We're not even at a Cold War with Russia, other than the name-calling fest that we've been involved in. Imposing sanctions on Russia doesn't make us a puppet. Various military actions that I just kind of described briefly doesn't make us a puppet. So, yeah. Did Trump commit financial crimes? Absolutely. Absolutely. That's going to come out. And the guys that have been convicted so far have not been convicted of anything regarding the election. In fact, when Mike Flynn got busted, he got busted to lying to investigators about meeting with the Russian ambassador, which is not unusual. And why was he meeting with the Russian ambassador? At the behest of Israel, to get the Russians to back off of Syria. That's not really A, illegal, or B, it should just be make it more transparent how much we take our marching orders from Israel and Saudi Arabia. But my point in all of this, the theme is you can't have it both ways, is 2.5 years. This stuff started probably around the end of 2015 when Trump started getting some steam about Russia because he had business interests in Russia, and he still does. And he's probably going to be worthy of impeachment just on the emoluments clause alone. However, let's face it, this isn't Richard Nixon time. This isn't where Trump has put his thumb in the eyes of his base, at least politically, to where they're going to convict him even if he did get impeached. And with that stalwart leader, Nancy Pelosi, saying we're not going to impeach him anyway because there's no value in it, well, she's been bought. And if you don't know that your politicians are bought, well, then you deserve the fucking government you get from these people. But my point in all of this, and I got some more points to make, but my point in all of this is that as far as Trump goes, you can't have it both ways. For 2.5 years, all I've been hearing is how stupid he is. Man, he's crazy. And I agree. I think he's a wildly unstable, dumb man. He is not an intelligent person. He doesn't read. I don't think he even watches documentaries. The only thing he really watches is Fox News and tweets. And the only reason he watches anything is to have people say nice things about him, because that's who he is. He's a big, gigantic 12-year-old who, because he's been mollycoddled by his fucking dad, never had to do anything by way of real work ever in his life. And when he went bankrupt for the third or fourth time is when he started getting in bed with Russian mobsters. And not necessarily the government. And as evidenced earlier, the things that I was saying, you'd have to be an idiot to believe that Trump is a puppet of the government doing the things that we've been doing internationally since he's been president. Not one thing favorable to Russia have we been doing. So how is he a puppet? He's either the stupidest man to hold the office of the presidency, which is my personal opinion, or he's the cagiest, smartest, sleuth-like James Bond dodgy guy who's evaded the NSA, which is 10 times larger than the CIA and the FBI, right? You can't be both. You're either the stupidest person to hold office, or it's just a great act, and you've been able to elude the intelligence of this country and possibly MI6 in addition, and for 2.5 years evade capture on fixing the election, which is such a fucking pipe dream. Just here's if you're going to take anything from this, if you're a so-called liberal, or if you think you're on the left and you buy this Russia shit, a couple of things. First of all, oh, by the way, that's why you can't have it both ways. He can't be stupid and smart enough to evade the CIA. There you go. But if you buy this Russia shit, you're no brighter, no more educated, no more intelligent than the right wing who were all over the Benghazi crap with Hillary Clinton a few years back. Now, I personally believe she did fuck up in Benghazi. But the reason why that investigation was a cakewalk was they weren't asking her questions about why we were in Libya in the first place. It was all about just that incident in Benghazi. And even then, they weren't even asking her about why the ambassador of the United States to Libya, Chris Stevens, was funneling weapons to moderate rebels, which if you don't know what that means, that's fucking terrorists. That's Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, and ISIS. Funneling weapons to those guys, which is illegal. And why 8 months before we had NATO bomb the fuck out of Libya, destroy that country, and then we followed up with more shit, having Gaddafi completely knocked out. And if you don't remember the awesome video clip of Hillary Clinton in a makeup room getting the news that Gaddafi died, she crowed about it like it was like it was her birthday, because she's a sociopath, crazy person. Well, that's exactly where you're at. And I know I went off on a bit of a tangent with Benghazi, but this is the Benghazi for the left. This shit has been catnip for the so-called left. If you're watching MSNBC or CNN, you think that's like progressive media, you're an idiot. You're an idiot, and you deserve the government that you get. You truly, truly do. You can't have it both ways. You can't sit there and want to believe a lie so bad because the media cannot cover what's really wrong with this country, because that's too much bother. We can't cover the fact that 50% of working Americans make under 30 grand a year. We can't cover the fact that we're in 8 wars still. And it's not like Trump is some non-interventionist. Make no mistake. He's trying to get out of Syria. He's trying to get out of, He's trying to get out of Iraq. He's trying to get out of Afghanistan. Not because he's some non-interventionist. He just wants his own wars. He wants to divert funds and attention to Iran and Venezuela. And make no mistake, if you haven't noticed, the saber rattling in the press with the new president, I promise you by the end of 2020, if not summer by 2020, the October surprise is going to be that we invade fucking Mexico because he's mean to his people. It's the same fucking script. If you're on the so-called left and you buy the same fucking war script, you're not on the left. You're not progressive. You're not anti-war. You're part of the problem. You're the reason why we have had the same war script for 70 years. You're no different than the pseudo-intellectuals that backed up Woodrow Wilson going into World War I, which was also based on a fucking lie. And believing this Russiagate narrative and earnestly believing it and just filling your brain with this shit, because it's all been conspiracy theory, not conspiracy fact. And those are two very different things. A conspiracy theory is merely a theory, not proven. Conspiracy fact, it's where facts come out, where you actually find people who've committed crimes, like the conspiracy to sell weapons to the Iranians, who were supposed to be our enemy at the time, fighting Iraq against Iraq, and then using that money to fund the Contras in Nicaragua against the Sandinista government, which was democratically elected. That shit was a conspiracy, and those motherfuckers got convicted. But George H.W. Bush, Bush 1, pardoned them, which is why Elliot Abrams, the raving cocksucker from hell, is in the White House today doing the same shit in Venezuela that he orchestrated in El Salvador. Oh, and by the way, he's responsible for 80,000 people dying in El Salvador. But the so-called left wants to sit there and say, well, our intelligence agencies, Trump doesn't believe our intelligence agencies. Okay, what do you want to bet that after this week, that narrative is going to go away too? Because the so-called left is going to freak out that Robert Mueller betrayed them. I'm sorry, you counted on fucking spooks to be loyal to you? Pardon me while I take a sip. You counted on fucking spooks to be loyal to you, which blows my mind. They're spooks. That's what they're called. That's what they do. They're spooks. CIA have never made a government overthrow they didn't like. In fact, in the you can't have it both ways narrative, we like to say that we're the shining city on the hill, yet from 1948 to 2000, we overthrew or meddled in 81 elections. And this does not count assassinations, coups, or flat-out executions, like with Patrice Lumumba, who was the prime minister of the Congo all of 9 months, and we killed him and installed Mobutu. And he was there till about the late 90s, early 2000s, until he died. Not before he siphoned out billions of dollars of our money and money out of the Congo for him and his family. He was a full-on dictator, but he was our dictator. So this shining city on the hill crap where you can't have it both ways, it's crap. Because while we purport these values, and we talk about democracy, first of all, we have one of the most corrupted election systems in the world, hands down. The Electoral College alone puts us in one of the most corrupted systems, hands down. Then you look at all the interferences that we've done, and if you can go back let's just go back 70 years. Forget the Spanish-American War, which is another piece of shit based on a lie, that we went in to basically take the Philippines and Japan and Hawaii and everything else. But why don't you take a look at what we've done in the last 70 years, starting in Korea? We have not invaded a country that was better off after we left it. We have not, quote, defended a country that was not better off after we left it. We killed 3.8 Vietnamese civilians. We killed 2 million Korean civilians. You know what that equals? The Holocaust. So we're no better than the fucking Nazis, but we're nicer about it. And you come to America and you can get some blue jeans, right? You get a nice phone, get a computer, maybe a car that works. That's kind of cool. And but that's fine. Overseas, what we do, we don't do anything to help anybody. The only people that do anything in this country to help anybody are genuine nonprofits that, go overseas and help people. What do? We bomb people. We bomb the fuck out of people. We've killed 500,000 Iraqi civilians in the last, 15 years. Somewhere near 200,000-300,000 Afghans in the last 18 years. War is almost 18 years old. And this fall, it'll be 18 years old that we've been in Afghanistan. I saw some meme the other day that kids that are now, for the first time in American history, the kids that were born during the Afghan war are now able to fight the war that their dad fought in. That's the first time in American history that's ever happened, that we've been in a war that long, where the babies of the soldiers are now able to fight in the war that their dads fought in. That's insane. That's insane. But we keep doing it because the military-industrial complex, which is not a theory, it's a fucking fact. If you don't know what Raytheon is or Halliburton is or Hewlett-Packard is, those guys, they buy senators, they buy Congress people, just like AIPAC does. And those people do what those guys say, not what you say, unless you threaten their career, unless you threaten to primary them. That's about it. So, again, back to my original point of the you can't have it both ways. The shining city on the hill routine is bullshit. Because, like I said, we've interfered in how many elections between 1948 and 2000? This is according to the Carnegie Institute, by the way, not Abe's Gazette. That's and not to mention how many we've done since. And we're crowing about Russia interfering with our democracy. The first fucking election they had, we fixed for Boris Yeltsin. Right? Gorbachev was too much of a progressive. He was making too many waves. He was trying to salt treat everything. He nuclear treaties. I mean, he was all about that. He was all about redirecting funds back into Russia and investing in his country, not doing what we were doing. And we got rid of him as soon as we could. 1992, fucking alcoholic knothead who just isn't into the vision thing, Boris Yeltsin. And then 96, Boris Yeltsin. So finally, after he got ignominiously, is that a word, tossed, Putin took over. And he had a tougher, harder line. And rightfully so. People forget how up his ass we are. We are on the Russian border now with NATO. We took Poland. We took everybody. We got everybody into NATO. The Warsaw Pact is 100% gone, but people ignore that. And just imagine if Russia had Mexico and Canada. How would we feel about Russia turning Mexico and Canada into a Warsaw Pact nation, meaning they'll defend Russia before they'll help us. That's exactly what that means. They are their allies. That's what we did. We have broke every promise that we've ever made. The Iran deal was not a perfect deal, but it was a good deal. And it was a good deal because it removed sanctions from Iran. They were able to trade again, but also it gave us control over their nuclear program, which, by the way, no bombs. No bombs. And they've got, 15,000 centrifuges? And they're still dealing with the EU. So for us to get out of that deal, it's going to take decades to repair the damage we did to U.S. trust. Because we break every fucking deal we've ever had. We don't honor our deals. We just don't do it. And we've got a record of that shit too. And some of y'all will be sitting there listening going, well, if we're not the shining city on the hill, why don't you leave? Fuck you, because I can criticize this. You know why? Because I live here too. And I pay taxes too. And I don't like seeing my taxpayer dollars go to bombing people, creating refugees and terrorists, creating failed states like fucking Libya, where the oil is completely in the hands of criminals now and not benefiting the people. And now they sell slaves in Libya. Thank you, Hillary Clinton. She wanted to prove how tough she was by going into Libya, getting NATO to go into Libya. Oh, and by the way, this summer, Nicolas Sarkozy is on trial for genuine campaign finance fraud. And one of the things he's going to be accused of doing was taking $50 million from, wait for it, Muammar Gaddafi, the leader of Libya, in 2007. And that's going to be really convenient because then you got to have a ton, and that's not going to be covered in the U.S. I promise you. That is not going to be covered in the United States. I can promise you that. That is not going to be covered in the United States. And why? Because then we have to air our dirty laundry. And when we air our dirty laundry, then we're not the shining city on the hill. And as James Baldwin wrote back in the day, the challenge with the United States is we have a psychosis going on. We ignore the slavery, the murder, the genocide, the stealing of land. And we ignore it because we want to basically defend alcoholics, sex abusers, basically. We're like the children of alcoholics. Oh, no, we're great. We don't do anything wrong. Trail of Tears, internment camps. Yeah, no. We're the shining city on the hill. No, we're not. No, we're not. No, we are not. If we were, we would be, right? And this is where, when I say you can't have it both ways, you can't be the shining city on the hill and ignore all your fucking shit. That's our psychosis. It's the same nitwits who say things like, well, there's no racist problem. We fixed that. Did we? Did we really? It's Obama's fault we have racism. It's Bush's fault we have racism. We have been a racist country from the get-go. That never went away. It subsided. It got buried for a while. And now it's in full bloom, at least the last 5-6 years. Under Obama, we had visible racist problems. I think he was a shitty president, but I can promise you half his problems came from the fact that he was black. The GOP, after they got the majority, they were never going to do anything unless it was going to serve their interests, right? Bail out the banks, cool. Keep going into wars, cool. Everything that the Republicans like to do, he did. He was the black Reagan. So those of you on the left, the so-called left, that say, oh, no, he was a great president of my lifetime. Really? So you like bombing civilians, like the fact that he had a kill list every Tuesday with fucking drones? And do you like the fact that Iran caught a couple of our drones and they've mimicked them? So if we go to war with Iran, which Trump and John Bolton and Elliot Abrams and all those cocksuckers want to do, well, guess what they got? They got U.S. drones that they've duplicated like by the thousands by catching a couple that kind of crashed in Iran that didn't do the gig in Iraq. So they caught them and made drones. And if any of you think we can go into Iran and beat them, you need to listen to these words carefully. We have lost. We haven't won a war. We haven't won any. Grenada, not a war. Invading a country of 2,000 people is not a war. Panama, country the size of Austin, Texas, we killed 6,000 civilians. That was not a victory. That was us taking out a dictator who no longer served our needs, because we support 73% of the world's dictators until they don't, and then we take them out. So Korea, that was a draw. Eisenhower saw that we were losing. He said, fuck this. We already lost 500,000 kids, and we don't want to go war with China. And we had already engaged in air fights with the Chinese in Korea. That's another thing that the fucking media won't tell you, okay? So long story short, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq twice. We got our asses kicked there. We haven't won. The only thing we did was damage any credibility of humanity in Iraq and Afghanistan. What we did in Abu Ghraib prison, everything that we've done. We lost Syria. We lost Libya. We're not winning these things. We go into Venezuela. You think we're going to win in Venezuela? Short of a nuclear option, we are not going to win in Venezuela. All they have to do is survive. And then the U.S. will be defeated, because the U.S.'s goal is to defeat. That's why World War II was such a big success, because we beat them. They didn't survive. They had to remake themselves into our image. Otherwise, it was not going to be good. But Korea, they survived, despite the fact we killed 2 million of their people. Vietnam, they survived, right? They survived. So we lost because they survived. Iraq is decimated. It's a failed state. It's destroyed. That was not our goal. Our goal was nation building and to create an ally there. We haven't. We failed. Afghanistan, aside from the opium and the lithium that we're digging out of there, there's not a whole lot of benefit, frankly, unless you're the Sackler family. So how are we winning? So what are we fighting for? I used to feel guilty when I'd be at the airport. I'd see some kid in military uniform, and I used to thank him for his service, right? Because you get that beat in your head. Thank you for your service. And which was cool when they were coming back from something that was significant. But about 2005, I kind of realized that the Afghan war was bullshit. Pakistan and Saudi Arabia were responsible for 9/11, not Afghanistan, not Iraq. And so we're going after these guys for what? Resources and oil, right? And at one point I just realized how much we spent and how much Iraq alone was going to cost us when you count the wounded coming back and continual VA care. And we've spent like $7 trillion on Iraq alone. It's a ridiculous number, like something like $3 trillion in Afghanistan. It's a ridiculous number. Most of our debt from 2000 on has been incurred for war. Like 70% of it. So this isn't a big mystery. This isn't news. But I quit thanking military personnel because I just could not, with a straight face. I'm the adult in the room, and I wouldn't tell them this because I don't. You're already committed, right? I'm in a bar in an airport. I used to buy them a beer. Hey, have a beer, kid. And I feel like, no, I'm just encouraging your behavior because we're lying to you. The military are honorable folks for the most part. Yeah, we get some maniacs out there, believe it. But they're volunteering. And as such, we should be sending them in harm's way when it's absolutely necessary. Not because Excuse me. Not because corporate interests dictate we send them there. And sending the military into anything is supposed to be a last resort, not a first response. And with us, because we have so many chicken hawks who've never served, who don't have family that serves, I think Joe Biden is like one of the only oligarch type people alive that had any children in the military. None of those guys have kids in the military. Not like back in the day. It's not like, like the Kennedys in the military or the Roosevelts in the military. It's just no one's in the military. So their first response is, we'll send those people. Because now it's all poor kids. Poor and some middle class. Because what have we done? We've decimated jobs in this country. So when people give me this shining city on the hill stuff, you can't have it both ways. We're not the shining city on the hill. The shining city on the hill doesn't destroy and decimate other countries, turning them into failed states. The shining city on the hill is not at the behest of donors or the donor class. We don't do things because rich oligarchs tell us to. And that's what every war we're involved in, including Venezuela. You think that's for humanitarian reasons? You deserve the fucking government you get. And maybe you should quit watching TV. I say that all the time online. Had one woman say, you need to come up with something new. That's old. Well, it wouldn't be old if you would quit watching fucking TV. But apparently you do. So apparently I have to keep saying it because you keep watching fucking television. So yeah, quit watching TV. Because Venezuela, what are we doing for them that's humanitarian? 105 sanctions right now. They're having money problems? Yeah, they can't sell their oil. And in the United States, where Citgo is a big company, a big Venezuelan company, they cannot send profits to Venezuela. Who owns Citgo? That's a government-owned company. We took the British bank, Bank of London took $1.2 billion of Venezuelan gold and kept it. And why? Because Venezuela kicked BP out a while ago. And so now it's like, all right, now they're trying to get even. And we're letting them do it because we want more pain on Venezuela. And the sanctions don't hurt the government. They hurt the people. And the theory of, well, you squeeze them from the bottom and then the people will help you revolt. No, they won't. Iraq lost 500,000 babies under Clinton's sanctions. They didn't really rally to help the United States. When we invaded Iraq in 2003, the citizenry wasn't, aside from those couple of shots when you see people knocking down Saddam's statues, that didn't happen. And then with the Afghans, Jesus Christ, their soldiers were shooting our soldiers in class, barely covered in the American media. I mean, you have to read The Intercept or see it on Al Jazeera to understand what's going on. Because the American media is purchased, it's bought. So you want to talk about shining city on the hill? Gee, we've got an oligarch government. We've got a bought corporate media that used to be the fourth estate that's supposed to be investigating these motherfuckers, and they don't. We've got a fixed economy. And if you think it's not, then you're 12, because the bankers run this country. And you've got a situation now where we evaporate jobs in this country at an alarming rate. Trump's supposed to create more jobs. GM has already gotten rid of 30,000 jobs this year, gone to Monterrey, Mexico. And before anyone lest blame the unions, I could do a whole hour on the unions. I'm going to wrap this up pretty soon because I'm feeling parched. But anyway, unless anyone wants to blame the unions, that's a fool's errand. Because before 1961, it was illegal to manufacture anything and sell it in the United States. So you couldn't manufacture outside of the country and then bring it back in and sell it here. It had to be manufactured in the U.S. Now, if you're a GM and you bought Opel, right, German company, you could manufacture Opel at a German company. You could sell those cars in Europe. You can even import Opels as an import car, but you couldn't manufacture a Chevrolet in Thailand and sell it here. And now we're so dialed in with NAFTA and everything else. I mean, when Kennedy got rid of that rule, it was a rule, like a law. When Kennedy got rid of that and allowed the Department of Labor to assign a 5% quota of manufacturing overseas, well, okay, that was cool. Fine, 5%. But every president of both parties since Kennedy, from 61 to 92 when Bill Clinton became president, had increased that. So by the time Clinton became president, like 70% of American manufacturing was being done overseas. And then he does NAFTA. which just sent the car crashing through the plate glass window at the mall. And that was the end of it. Unions were for the most part decimated. Unless it's a federal union, most unions have almost no membership at all whatsoever. And the states that have right to work, those unions are basically glorified associations. Excuse me, they go to the city every year, or their boss, can you have a raise this year? Nope. Okay. And for people that tell me it's socialist to have a union, it's communist to have a union, you're listening to baked in the brain bullshit, because it's communist to have a shitty boss. It's tyrannical to have a shitty boss and allow him to do shitty things to you, including not pay you and or fire you just because he doesn't like you or because you're a minority that he doesn't seem to be cool with. And he could do those things because there's no union to protect you. So it goes both ways. Again, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, the unions are bad, blah, 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 and then complain about your boss, because that's exactly why unions exist. Because your boss wants you to do as much as you can do for as little as you can do. And so unless we start ramping some things back and create a whole other industries, we're going to be having some problems. But again, the whole point of this is you can't have it both ways. Michael Jackson's family can't have it both ways. Those guys were either lying then and they're lying now, or they were telling the truth then, quote unquote, and now they're lying. Bullshit. If you're saying they're known liars, why were they known liars? They admitted to lying in a trial that protected your son? Well then, that means that you can't have it both ways. The Trump Russiagator people, he's either the stupidest man to hold office, the most infantile, dim bulb imbecile to hold office, or he's the cagiest, smoothest motherfucker that has ever lived, because he's outrun every agency that we've had chasing him down for 2.5 years. And they didn't prove shit. They didn't prove shit. And get the financial shit, go do what you want. But that's just the Democrats moving the goalposts because they don't want to admit that they ran the most hated candidate of their party in their party's history, and they cheated to do it, and they failed. They don't want to admit that. And they don't want to admit that she's a goddamn Republican anyway. If she had an R next to her name, those same motherfuckers would pay attention to every sin she's ever committed. Super predators, the crime bill, gutting welfare along with her husband. She was full-throated in support of all that shit. When she was a senator, she was for the Iraq War, Secretary of State, Syria, Libya. Her entire career has been nothing but one big, flaming fucking grease fire of a disaster. And if she was a Republican, those hypocritical motherfuckers would pay attention to it. But they don't. So, again, can't have it both ways. If you're going to be the shining city on the hill, you got to do what Germany did back in the day, and they still do. They remember the Nazis. They remember what happened. Excuse me. They remember what they did. They remember the 6 million Jews and the 4 or 5 million miscellaneouses they killed, right? They remember. They don't ever forget. The Nazi flag is illegal in Germany. You can't do the Heil Hitler salute, right? Jimmy Dore has this great example, and I 100% agree with him. The McCarthy shit that we did in the 50s, the Red Scare, where we were spying on people and calling people out, and like total dystopian, Kafka-esque crap. That should have been illegal. That kind of language should have been made illegal. So when these motherfuckers like Rachel Maddow or Chuck Todd or, Chris Matthews or that, Don Lemon, when they start doing this red baiting bullshit, ignoring all the dictators that we support in this country, by the way, and coming at people with this Red Scare crap, and Rachel Maddow going a few weeks back, going so far as to hypothesize, what if the Russians turned off the electrical grid in North Dakota? It's 30 below. That would kill people. Yeah. What if I was Brad Pitt? Okay. What if I had better abs? What if I was well read? What if I had $1 million? What if I had hair? What the fuck is your point? She's been the biggest conspiracy theorist of the last couple of years ever. Ever. I mean, I believe that the moon landing didn't happen before I believe anything comes out of her fucking mouth. Because she's a goddamn liar. She used to mean something, and she's trading on her past reputation as used to mean something, and now she's totally gaslighting you people that want to believe that she's the voice of reason. Well, you know who believed the voice of reason when Obama won in 2008? Sean Hannity's show and Bill O'Reilly's show became the #1 shows in this country. Why? Because the right wing freaked out that a black Kenyan Muslim Marxist became president of the United States. So they had to go to those stations to get their catnip. Oh, the birth certificate. Oh, Benghazi. It was catnip for those stupid morons. And the left has done the same goddamn thing with this Russiagate thing. They couldn't bring themselves to admit that all the finger wagging that they did for the previous few months after Bernie got cheated and telling people that they were stupid to vote for Jill Stein or Gary Johnson or whatever is a waste of their vote. It's not a waste of vote, asshole. It's called a democracy. You can't have it both ways. And that's the way that goes. So, folks, basically, I'm done. If this crap makes you uncomfortable, it's supposed to. Sleep tight.